Teachers of Reddit, what was the biggest student meltdown you ever witnessed? We were on a class trip on the way back to school when one of my colleagues pointed to a boy who was leaning against the subway doors, upset about something. I walked over and learned he had left his backpack at the movie theater and was very upset. I tried to encourage him but he didn't care. Eventually we are at our train stop and everyone is getting off, but this kid is still leaning against the subway doors. Opposite side had opened. Doors are about to close and only he and I remain from our group. I tell him please don't freak out but I'm gonna take you off the train, we have to go. He immediately starts struggling but I'm a big guy so I get him off. As train starts pulling away he is trying to walk back towards it and we are all like WTF, be careful, train is pulling out of station. Eventually I grab him and drag him backwards to the ground and yell at co-workers to get kids out of here. As they are walking away he is trying to crawl towards the open subway tracks, presumably to kill himself. This kid is 12 and I'm a giant man but I am struggling to subdue him. I wrestled in high school so I know how to keep control of someone on the ground but he is really determined to get to those tracks. I'm still struggling with him and another train comes by but I keep him on platform. People are by now asking him if he is okay and eyeing me like WTF are you doing to this child? Eventually I yell to my co-worker to go get the police and she runs off in tears. Now I'm alone struggling with this child on the ground and I assume it's about to get real but as soon as he hears mention of police he starts calming down and begs me to let him go, promising to be good. After a minute of not letting go I talk him into standing up with me and I take him away while aggressively holding his hand and putting my arm around him. We breathlessly walk into school and I immediately take him to main office where a small crisis team has gathered. Once he is safely sitting in a chair I collapse into one as well and start processing my ordeal. His family comes to school to pick him up but we have to mandatorily send him to hospital for psychiatric evaluation. Couple days later he is back in school like nothing ever happened. We had a special bond after that and he always came to my classroom to check on me all year even though I wasn't his teacher. I don't work at that school anymore but I'm heading back at end of this year to see those students graduate and hope to find him happier and healthier. We were meeting in the computer lab for a week because the students were working on projects. One of my students was hanging out with his girlfriend before class started. I was in the classroom, so I wasn't paying any attention to the conversation. He walks into the room and he was fuming. I asked him what was wrong and he didn't respond. He went to his computer and punched the screen. I tried to calm him down and he picked up the table, which had 5 computers on it, and tipped it over. I got the rest of the students out and called security. He absolutely destroyed the computer lab. He was suspended for the rest of the year, was banned from prom and graduation, and his parents had to pay for the damages. His girlfriend apparently cheated on him. I heard they got back together after that, but it was never confirmed. I taught English in Korea to middle and high school students. I like to walk up and down the aisles between the desks occasionally during class just to make sure that everybody is paying attention and not using their phones. One day during a 7th grade class I walked to the very last row and looked down. I see a nice girl, completely average in every way, using an X-Acto knife to carve up her arms. Both arms were bleeding profusely and had about 30 horizontal cuts up to her elbows. She tried to cover them up but I walked up on her too quickly. I grabbed the assistant teacher and whispered to her what was going on without any of the other students noticing and she took the girl to the nurse. Not an overt meltdown, but something was wrong there. I worked as a 2nd grade teacher at an elementary school for a couple years. One of the more talented girls, it's hard to tell who is really smart at that age, but she always seemed on top of things, had no dad, and lived with her mom who it turned out was a bit of a heroin addict. One Monday she came into school looking just totally shell-shocked. I asked her what was wrong and she wouldn't say. This lasted till the Tuesday of the next week. Another student who was always trying to get under anyone's skin made fun of this girl for her mom's addiction, and the girl just lost it. She tried to punch the other student and just started screaming. Once we had calmed her down, we asked her what had set her off, and she explained that her mom had been using the needles again last week and had gotten high, but that she was still sleeping on the bed. We weren't sure what this meant, but as is procedure, we called the police who went with CPS to check it out. Turns out, her mom OD'd the weekend before, and the girl had no idea she was dead, so she just kept doing her thing. That was pretty terrifying. I'm a teacher in a prison. They were doing Mavis Beacon teaches typing and one inmate keep putting his hands on the wrong keys, to which he freaks out and starts yelling at the computer how it's a dumb motherfucker. Not me, but a teacher friend of mine was proctoring SATs when one kid flips his desk and screams "Fuck you Daniel" and storms out. Turns out Daniel had been ripping his own pubes out of his junk and putting them on the kid's shoulder in front of him. When the kid in front of him found out, he obviously flipped out. And for the record, yes, Daniel is a fake name. This happened 10 years ago, when I worked as a primary school teacher. I was teaching year 2 8-ish-year-olds at the time. One student stood out. He was a very bright kid, could do mental arithmetic as quickly as me if not faster, but he was also extremely weird. No eye contact. Did odd repetitive stuff by himself at recess, like timing his sprints across a certain section of playground over and over. He had a few less odd friends who tolerated him, but he was mostly bullied for being so strange. He usually reacted stoically or defensively, but one day he absolutely snapped. At recess, he was being teased by a popular girl for reading so much, and she dared him to punch her when he got upset. Apparently today was the day, because he did more than once, all directly to the stomach. Probably 5-6 good kid-sized blows before I reached them, and he snapped out of it and stopped. He got put through the ringer for that, as most teachers disliked him as well. I tried to explain he was constantly bullied and usually non-violent. It got taken into consideration and he was still suspended for a week. I once had a student who was using a laser pointer during class presentations that day, and after his group was finished, he was of course the normal freshman and decided to shine it around the room. Before I was able to tell him to cut it out, he managed to shine it in another student's direction. The student who had the laser pointed at him exploded. He flipped his desk screaming a string of profanities before punching my cinder block wall, shattering his hand. He then stormed out of my classroom before I was able to address the situation, get him some help for his hand. GF. I teach English in Japan and I worked in some elementary schools for a few years. In one class, this one kid just wouldn't keep quiet, kept talking in a loud voice to the kid next to him no matter how many times I asked him to be quiet and pay attention. I got frustrated and told him off, saying that even if he didn't want to learn, he was screwing it up for everyone else and to either be quiet or get out, all in Japanese of course. Just to note, kids are almost never kicked out of class in Japan as far as I'm aware, because people have the right to education by law here. The kid flipped out and started yelling at me. I can't remember everything he said, but the highlight would translate as approximately "die you fucking pervert," and this was coming from a 4th grader. Then he buggered off somewhere, edited, swapped 2 letters and added a word. I had a 1st grader that was hot. We did not have air conditioning, so he stood up, knocking over his chair. That wasn't enough, so he threw the chair, then walked to my desk and cleared it off with a swipe of his arm. After that, he pushed the intercom button calling the office, and before they could answer, he stepped into the hall to sit down to wait for the principal. Once the principal arrived to take him to the air-conditioned office, the student bit the principal on the arm. We heard the hollering as we were trying to clean up. He was suspended for 3 days and got to stay home in his air-conditioned apartment. In 8th grade, 13 years old, a military kid who had only been at our school for the year was moving again. He had severe anger issues and was seen as kind of weird. On our last field trip, he stood up, said this long-winded speech, and then proceeded to tell all the teachers and some of the kids to fuck off. It was hilarious. Sad. Edited to add my understanding that the situation was also very sad. Unfortunately, I was cursed with a humor that made even my grandmother's wake a funny day. And if you mix that with the fact that we were all evil middle schoolers, you get an insensitive asshole. I'm not a teacher, but I was assisting a teacher because I'm a student 8, and one of the students started arguing with the teacher and he threw his desk down hard and started calling the teacher a godless whore. I told him to calm down and he punched me in the face and then stormed out of the classroom. He was expelled due to that being his 3rd disturbance, and I got a black eye. Wow, I turn off my computer and I wake up with over 1,000 karma from this response. Thanks for all the funny comments. IDK if this counts, but I tutor at this girl's house. She's in her early teens, and there was this point in helping her with her homework where she made a mistake in pen and made it white out. Neither her nor her mom could find it, and it ended with the child yelling, "I have OCD, mom. I can't go on without whiteout. I am having an OCD attack. Why do you always do this to me?" "No, I swear I have OCD. What the hell?"